Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, divorce is an unhappy thing. We have a high rate of divorce in this country, and most people who get divorces are also parents. And this is a subject we have not talked really enough about, and it is about the quality of co-parenting. Yes, I said the quality of co-parenting. I have at my guest an expert, Teresa Harlow, who is the author of Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Guide. Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Guide. Welcome, Teresa Harlow.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. It's actually Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Code.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
You said guide.
Oh, I said guide instead of code.
Yes.
I am so sorry. Yes, that makes it a different meaning, doesn't it? The co-parenting code. And at this point, Teresa, I will just compliment you because your book has right brain and left brain qualities to it. The right brain, of course, is how to help people learn how to be collaborative. And it is a huge undertaking. And you speak with such personal sincerity, having gone through this yourself. And the other aspect is very left brain. You've got, what do you do for a holiday? What do you do? Pick up the school or not? What about finances? Where are you going to live? Going over all the aspects of custody and all the variations thereof. And again, referring not only to your own history, your own experience, but to others as well.
Yeah.
So let me repeat it to make sure I get it right. Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Code by Teresa Harlow.
There you go.
Yeah. So I can ask you why you wrote the book. And of course, you wrote it, as you say, it was your experience and you want to share with other co-parents. I will start with something that I found really new in the book, which was the idea of not trying to fix the relationship.
Yes.
And of saying, okay, we already resigned ourselves that we're not good romantic partners. We're not good cohabitants. But we can be excellent co-parents, and we have to be excellent co-parents for the sake of our child or children.
That's right.
So, yeah. So that's number one. And the other is that I found very intriguing is that you don't have to get an apology. You don't have to iron out your hurt and anger. You can just say it didn't work. Ideally, of course, the person apologizes and you apologize and you go over that as well for wrongdoings. But it is not necessary to fix your relationship with your co-parent to be a good co-parent.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you gravitated to that immediately because that was the thing. After I wrote it, I was like, wow, now that's an epiphany people can use. And I'll tell you how I came to that. It's kind of interesting because originally I didn't have that content in the early phases of the book. And I shared an early version of it with a friend who had went through the divorce and co-parenting journey himself. And he said, this is great information, but what about those of us who can't even get past the anger we have with each other to get to this place, to make this possible? And I was like, I don't think I've tackled that. So I need to take that away. So I took it away and I thought about it, and I thought about how I had worked through that with my ex-husband and how I had observed others who had been able to accomplish it. And I, just kind of landed on this idea. Well, we didn't focus on our relationship with each other. We didn't focus on fixing the romantic relationship with each other. More importantly, we focused on our relationship as parents together, as a parenting team. And by dropping that and setting aside that other aspect of our relationship that we had now conceded was not moving forward, it allowed us to really focus on what we wanted rather than where we had been and what couldn't work. And so I took that back and put it in there as the third stage of the book, correcting course.
So talk about correcting course, right, Teresa?
Yeah.
And I loved your story about how you asked your co-parent, Bob, your ex, to work on the book with you, and he was very excited.
Yeah.
And then when he read it, he took it back and said, no way. And I stopped writing the book. And you learned something so profound, Teresa. Will you share it with our audience?
Sure. So, this is, and Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Code is my second book on the topic of co-parenting. So my first book was Happily Divorced, and it was really more of what you would call a I can't even say it. It was our story.
Yeah, it was a memoir.
A memoir.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
And it was really how we had decided to co-parent. It didn't necessarily cover how other people might experience co-parenting or the things they might encounter, but it was very personal to us. And as I wrote that as my first book ever, I thought it would be really interesting to have not just me saying, hey, this went well, but to also have my former partner say, I agree. Here's how I saw it slightly differently, but in the end, we came together on it, and get his perspective in there. And then also had my son do some writing in it as well, to kind of round it out, to say he also found this to be a good experience, so that it'd have that credibility, right? It's not just me claiming it.
Wow. And Ian is a teenager now, right?
Well, actually, no, he's 28 at this point.
28. Oh,
yeah.
Time flies. Yes.
I know.
Of course.
Right? It does just fly. But so I took the idea to Bob and I said, hey, what do you think about this? Would you like to be involved and contribute? I think it'd be really cool to have me write on a topic and then have you give your perspective and then do that throughout the book. And he thought, well, that sounds really interesting. I think that could be awesome. So he agreed, and I wrote the book and then started sharing the chapters. And as I was sharing them with him, I was also sharing them in blogs to kind of get some early feedback from people. And this was the pre-edited sort of versions of these chapters. And we were pretty good for the first 3 chapters. And then it came to chapter 4, which kind of dealt with some of the reasons that our relationship met its demise. And that's when all hell broke loose. And, he reached out to me. I guess it was in email, although I missed it, which actually was a problem as well, because he thought I was just ignoring him. But, he was imploring me to just stop, because he really saw the story very differently in his mind when it came to that part of it. And he wasn't prepared to see this in the, worldview and have others see him that way and all of this. And he said, you need to stop writing this. And if you continue, I have to tell you, you're going to have to rewrite the last chapter, because it's no longer going to be happily divorced. And I was like, wait, no, this cannot happen. I cannot write a book that says we did a great job co-parenting until I wrote a book about it. And so I asked him to just stop reading and let's take a pause. And at the time, I had this corporate career that was really very demanding. And so I kind of just set it aside for several months and focused on that. Then I came back to it like about 4 months later, and I thought, what can I do with this? I'm not willing to abandon it. It's too important to share this. So I thought about our co-parenting journey. Everything I talk about in both books is all based on the idea of treating the other person the way you want to be treated. And with that, and thinking about what Bob had said, he said, I didn't see it this way. This isn't how I processed the situation. I thought, well, let me read it and try to imagine myself being him. And how do I receive those words if I put myself in his shoes? And I read it that way. And I kept getting these little cringy feelings like, ooh, I don't like how that feels to me if I was him. I didn't like what that sounded like, it made him out to be if I were on his side of things. And so I started doing major revisions. And then after I completely revised it and tried to really maintain, I didn't want to sterilize it. I didn't want it to be like, oh, everything was great on both sides. We agreed on everything. So I told him, I said, look, I've rewritten it. I've revised it substantially. I've tried to maintain the authenticity of it while also balancing it and being fair to you in what I've shared. So will you take another look at it? And he said, okay. So I took him over a printed transcript of it. And he said, well, okay, I'm going to get to this probably in the next week or so. And I knew better. I knew the curiosity would just kill him. And so I got home, and about 4 hours later, he called me and he's like, well, I have to back up a second, because I had told him, I said, look, when I handed it to him, I said, if you still find things in here that are really terribly objectionable that you can't get past, please, let's talk about them. And I'm sure there's a way I can still tell the story and not have it be destructive to our relationship. So just highlight them and we'll talk about them. So I'm back home now, and about 4 hours later, he texts me and he says, well, I'm past chapter 4 and so far no highlights. And I was like, oh, we're on a better path now. And then he called me maybe an hour later and he said, I'm finished. And I think that this is much better. I feel much better about it. I don't think I'm prepared to write on every chapter, but I am willing to contribute something to it. So I'll write your forward. So, the bottom line was that by me putting myself in his position and trying to adopt a mindset of treating him the way I'd want to be treated, how my words landed on him, how that would feel to me if I heard someone saying it about me or reading that about me. What would it do to how I felt about things? And remembering that more important than writing the book was preserving this relationship, because he will be in my life for the duration of it, with our child there, even past the point where your child is grown, you still have marriages and grandchildren and lots of times when you'll be put in a position to interact with this person. And you don't want to resign yourself to a life of just constant conflict and being on edge and misery. So that's our story of correcting course, which really informed me on writing that third stage in the current book.
Yes, and it is so important, the principle of the golden rule, and if you deconstruct what you just said about Bob, he told you forthright. He gave you information. And one thing you talk about in your book is keeping the communication channels open. So he said, I didn't like it, and you listened, and you were willing to acknowledge, yeah, I can see it through your eyes, and it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look good, and it doesn't even seem fair. And I want to be fair. And so much to your credit, Teresa Harlow, you wrote it. You were able to really follow the principle of the golden rule and write it in a way that he could stomach it. He could see it. As a psychotherapist, I will tell you, I deal with this question so often, how to deal with your ex-spouse and the children, and how to minimize the hurt of children. And we know we have a whole library of books on parental estrangement now, which is not something that people grew up with. The term parental estrangement, we know how common it is. We know how easy it is for a parent to put down their ex to their children. As a way to vent, as a way to build encampments. You be on my side. He's the enemy. She's the enemy. You be on my side. And the opposite of the golden rule, the primitive brain, right? Our reptilian brain, our mammal brain, doesn't look at imagination or perspective at all. It's about fight, flight, and it's a survival game, and not even thinking, it seems, about how this splits your child in half. Because the child loves both parents. You put down my parent, you put down half of me.
That's right.
And a lot of the parental estrangement books, and why I'm excited about your book, are what do you do after the child is not ruined, but so injured, and the relationship either has been essentially ruined. How do you restore that? And things to say, which is very, very, very important. I have helped people very personally with this and seen very successful results, which is nothing short of a miracle, to have a reunion with one's daughter that you haven't talked to for 20 years, you name it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So also what I like about your book is that you put into words all the bugaboos that parents, co-parents can deal with. The stage one uncoupling. We have to tell the kids. You go over how to tell the kids together, if at all possible, who gets the kids, as I mentioned, all about custody, where will everyone live, and the whole concept of nesting and rotating homes. You go over that, the child's education, and what about the in-laws, and what about holiday gatherings, and they're still your child's grandparents.
That's right.
And is there a possibility of reconciliation? And then stage two, right? Life goes on. I've met someone, and this is all put in such vernacular, it is really for lay people. And it's so important to relate to people. I don't want to meet my ex's new someone. Hey, honey, want to meet my kids? How do we handle birthdays and stuff? I love that. Name of the chapter, and stuff. What about supporting your child's talents and interests? Whose dog is it anyway? Teresa, you don't leave anything uncovered. It's amazing. And what about vacations? And what about discipline? And what about money? What about extra money that is not in the formal agreement? And then finally, and then we're looking at yourself and how you keep yourself on course. So and co-parenting teens, there's just so much practical information that I think can help people move from their reptilian brains to the human brain where we actually can think and reason.
I think part of that, it's interesting because I'm both right and left-handed.
Yeah. Oh,
so they talk about, yeah,
wow.
They talk about people being, in their right brain if they're left-handed or left brain if they're right-handed. And I think I have a certain balance to me because of, I do some things right-handed, some things left-handed. And so I find it easy to balance things out and think from both perspectives and go back and forth. In fact, even my careers have run the gamut of things that are creative to things that are very technical and, I guess, science-based sorts of endeavors.
So I picked that up, and it's so important to very, very few people, Teresa Harlow, are whole-brained. And the what I think is rather esoteric, erudite, to try to teach people to have a collaborative mindset, a collaborative heart, collaborative behavior, when people obviously, by definition, have not been able to do with their entire marriage.
Yeah.
And this is what makes it so challenging.
Well,
co-parent well. Yeah.
Yeah. So something I stumbled upon as I was thinking about this concept of the person that can't get there, right? The person that is maybe feeling very selfish, and maybe it's not even selfish, it's self-preservation, right? Because you talked about the fight or flight, and a lot of behaviors are stemming from their fear of loss and fear of giving things up that they want. And I try to reposition that for people to say, look, I hear all the time, oh, just do it for the kids. And if you do it for the kids, that's going to, everything's going to fall into place. And I just don't think that's practical by itself. I think that it's also important to remember, if you create a better scenario for you and your child, that you're going to benefit as well. So even if you can't figure out how to treat someone else, you don't know how they want to be treated. You do know how you want to be treated. So you don't even have to feel for them. You really don't. You can just feel what you would feel in a scenario and stick to that course, stay that course, and just kind of with a little bit with blinders on, just stay to that intention of only treat someone the way I'd want to be treated, only say things that I would want to hear said to me. And it's going to keep you from veering off into, conflicts that were maybe unintentional otherwise. But it does take intention. You gotta actually be in that moment with those words and think about their impact. So that does take some focus. And
focus, yes, you use that term a lot.
Yeah.
Teresa Harlow, author of Combative to Collaborative. I want to make sure that people know your book, in case you tuned in now and you said, oh, I really want that book, or I want that book for a friend. Combative to Collaborative, The Co-Parenting Code by Teresa Harlow. And Teresa, I think it's so important to live with intention, to live intentionally, and to set your intention and to reset your intention on a daily basis, even. Because I love the title of the award-winning civil rights series, Eyes on the Prize.
Yes.
Keep your eyes on the prize. What is the prize? Your children to come out of this, believe it or not, possibly even better. And one more point, and for everyone, if you are so fascinated by Teresa Harlow and her writing, we are coming back next week for part 2 of the series, where I will get to ask Teresa more questions. I just lost. Well, we'll talk about it next week. What I wanted to say, well, let me just say now that it's much easier to practice the golden rule than the platinum rule, which is teach others as they want to be treated, which is a guess, and treating others as you want to be treated, which is a more human principle.
Yeah.
So, Teresa, your book can be gotten anywhere, I assume?
Yeah, it's available from my website at teresaharlow.com and also on Amazon, of course, and Ingram. Just look for it there.
Okay. And any last words?
I just think that I want the parents to remember that you don't have to write each other off entirely just because you've chosen not to continue a romantic relationship. I see so many, there are so many books in this category that focus on the parent-child relationship and not that many that focus on preserving the parent-parent relationship. And really, that's the foundation for your child's happiness and yours, to create a parenting team that's a winning team for all of you.
Wonderful. Teresa Harlow is coming back next week. Stay tuned. Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Code. And I think of a code of ethics, right, Teresa?
That's right. A code of ethics.
Thanks. Code of ethics. Teresa, thank you so much. Thank you for writing the book from your experiences, sharing with us. And I'm so glad I'll get to speak to you next week.
Oh, thank you for having me. And if anyone wants to reach out and find out more, they can hit my website at teresaharlow.com. teresaharlow.com, Teresa. This is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.